I found the papers on Thursday afternoon while organizing Dad's messy desk for our quarterly tax meeting. There it was, buried between invoices and coffee-stained contracts, a legal document transferring complete ownership of our family's landscape architecture firm to my sister Paula, the same business I'd been running for 7 years, working 80-hour weeks without taking a single paycheck. The company I'd grown from 3 employees to 35, while Paula lived in California, chasing her art degree dreams. My hands trembled as I read the date 6 months ago. For half a year, every late night I'd spent designing sustainable drainage systems. Every weekend I'd sacrificed to meet client deadlines. Every relationship I'd lost because work consumed my life had been building Paula's empire, not mine. That evening arrived with its usual Thursday ritual family dinner at my parents' house. I sat across from Mom and Dad at the oak table where we'd shared countless meals, the legal documents burning in my purse like evidence of a crime. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled out the transfer papers and placed them beside the mashed potatoes. Care to explain this? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Dad's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Mom glanced at the papers, then at Dad, her expression shifting from confusion to something that looked almost like relief. "Oh, honey," Mom said, setting down her water glass with deliberate precision. "We've been meaning to discuss this with you." Meaning to discuss it. 6 months later. "Janet, maybe we should have handled this differently," Dad began, but Mom cut him off with a gentle wave. "Douglas, we talked about this. Karen is strong enough to understand." She turned to me with that patient smile she'd perfected over 32 years of motherhood. "Sweetheart, you know Paula has always been different from you. She's the dreamer, not the worker. You've got this incredible drive and intelligence that will take you anywhere you want to go." My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. "So you gave away my 7 years of work because I'm capable of starting over?" "It's not like that," Dad said, finally finding his voice. "Paula needs stability. She needs something handed to her because she'll never build it herself. You're different, Karen. You're the one who turned our little 3-person company into something amazing. You'll do that again somewhere else." The casual dismissal hit me like a physical blow. 7 years, 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, failed relationships, sacrificed health. I'd poured my soul into building something beautiful, and they were treating it like a participation trophy for my underachieving sister. "We're taking care of Paula the way parents should," Mom continued, reaching across to pat my hand. "And frankly, you should be grateful for all the management experience you've gained. That's worth more than money in the long run." "Wow, management experience," I repeated slowly, "for a business that was never mine to manage." "Oh, well, maybe Paula will hire you back once she gets settled," Mom suggested brightly. "You two could work together. Wouldn't that be lovely?" The worst part wasn't their betrayal. The worst part was how reasonable they made it sound, how they'd convinced themselves that destroying my life was actually an act of love. I folded the papers carefully and slipped them back into my purse. "When is Paula coming home to take over her inheritance?" "Next week," Dad said quietly. "She's driving up from Los Angeles with her boyfriend. She's excited to get started." Excited to get started. She'd probably never even seen our client files. "I need to go," I said, standing up from the table where I'd learned to tie my shoes, done homework, celebrated every promotion and milestone of my adult life. "Karen, don't be dramatic about this," Mom called as I headed for the door. "Family takes care of family. You'll understand someday when you have children of your own." I drove home through streets lined with properties we'd landscaped past the medical center, where I'd spent 3 months designing healing gardens for cancer patients, beyond the luxury development, where I'd created award-winning sustainable water features. Every project represented nights I'd worked until dawn, problems I'd solved that no one else could figure out, relationships with clients I'd built through trust and excellence. And now it all belonged to Paula. Paula arrived the following Tuesday in a brand new white BMW convertible music, blasting some indie song I didn't recognize. Her boyfriend Trevor climbed out of the passenger seat, wearing designer sunglasses and a smirk that immediately set my teeth on edge. Everything about him screamed trust fund baby, from his perfectly tousled hair to his expensive sneakers that had never touched actual dirt. Karen, Paula squealed, rushing over to hug me in the parking lot behind our office building. She looked exactly like she had in college, effortlessly, pretty, artfully messy blonde hair clothes that managed to look expensive and bohemian at the same time. "I've missed you so much. Have you—" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Paula's smile flickered for just a moment. "Of course I have. We're sisters." Trevor approached with the lazy confidence of someone who'd never worried about money or consequences. "So this is the famous Karen," he said, looking around our modest office building. "Paula's told me so much about her big sister who runs the family charity case." Trevor. Paula laughed, but it sounded forced. "He's just teasing. He has a weird sense of humor." Charity case. I'd built a business that employed 35 people, but to him, I was a charity case. "Well, we should probably get inside and start the transition," I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral. "There's a lot you'll need to learn about our current projects." "Actually," Paula said, pulling out her phone, "I've been thinking about that. Trevor's been helping me develop some ideas for modernizing the business. We want to take it in a more contemporary direction." She showed me her phone screen architectural mock-ups that looked like they'd been designed for a shopping mall. Glass and steel structures surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and geometric hedges. Nothing organic, nothing sustainable, nothing that respected the natural environment our company had built its reputation on. "These are interesting," I said carefully, "but they don't really align with our client base. We specialize in sustainable environmental design, working with natural ecosystems rather than against them." Trevor laughed. "That's very cute, and all but real money is in modern luxury developments. People want clean lines and impressive visuals, not a bunch of weeds and dirt." Weeds and dirt. He was describing native plant restoration and sustainable soil management systems that had taken me years to perfect. "Speaking of real money," Paula said, her voice taking on an excited edge, "I've been in contact with Greenscape Industries. They're interested in acquiring us." My blood turned to ice water. Greenscape Industries was the massive corporate competitor that had been systematically buying out smaller landscape architecture firms across the region, then gutting their environmental standards in favor of cheap, mass-produced designs. Paula, Greenscape is everything our company stands against. They clear-cut native habitats and replace them with non-native grass that requires constant chemical treatment. "But they're offering serious money," Trevor interjected. "Like life-changing money. Paula could sell this place and never have to worry about anything again." "The sale could happen within 3 months," Paula added. "I've already had preliminary conversations with their acquisition team. They're very interested in our client list." Our client list. The relationships I'd spent 7 years building with people who trusted our company specifically because we weren't like Greenscape. "Oh, and I called Henderson Development this morning." Paula continued casually, as if she was mentioning the weather. "I introduced myself as the new creative director and set up a meeting for Friday to discuss their eco-resort project." Henderson Development. Our biggest client. $2 million in annual revenue. Margaret Chen, their CEO, had specifically chosen our company because of the specialized environmental impact studies and wildlife preservation plans I'd spent 18 months developing for their luxury eco-resort project. "Paula, you can't just call our biggest client without understanding the project details. The Henderson Resort requires expertise in local ecosystem management, specialized drainage systems, and federal environmental compliance." How hard can it be? Trevor said with a shrug. Design is design. Plus, I've been working on some concepts that would really modernize their whole approach. Trevor had been working on concepts. Trevor, who thought native plants were weeds and dirt. I'm sure everything will work out fine, Paula said, but something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sure. Besides, you'll still be here during the transition period to help if needed. If needed. As if 7 years of specialized expertise were just a backup plan for when things went wrong. I should let you two get settled in, I said. Your meeting with Henderson is at 10 on Friday. Margaret Chen doesn't like to be kept waiting. I walked to my car on unsteady legs, feeling like I was watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. Paula had been planning this for months. The transfer, the sale to Greenscape, even the destruction of our relationship with Henderson Development. She'd orchestrated the complete dismantling of everything I'd built, and she was treating it like a fun new adventure. The worst part was how excited she looked about it all. Friday morning brought the phone call I'd been dreading since Tuesday. Dad's number flashed on my screen at 8:37, interrupting my first peaceful cup of coffee in years. I almost didn't answer. Karen, thank God you picked up. Dad's voice sounded strained older somehow. We have a serious problem. Let me guess, Henderson Development. How did you know? I set down my coffee mug, carefully watching steam rise from the surface like incense at a funeral. Lucky guess. What happened? Paula's meeting was a complete disaster. Margaret Chen called me personally at 7 this morning. She's furious, Karen, absolutely furious. Through the phone, I could hear Dad pacing. He always paced when he was stressed, wearing grooves in the carpet of his home office while he worked through problems that seemed impossible to solve. Tell me exactly what Paula presented. Those generic urban designs Trevor made. Apparently, Paula walked into the conference room with a portfolio of shopping center landscaping and tried to convince Margaret that they should replace your wildlife preservation plans with artificial turf and decorative fountains. My stomach dropped. She didn't. She did. And when Margaret asked about the environmental impact studies you'd been working on, Paula told her those were outdated approaches that weren't cost-effective for modern developments. 18 months of work. Soil analysis, watershed, mapping endangered species habitat, assessment, federal permitting applications. I'd personally hiked every acre of the Henderson property, documenting native plant communities and identifying migration corridors for local wildlife. The sustainable drainage system I designed would prevent erosion and filter stormwater, naturally protecting the downstream river system that supplied drinking water for 3 rural communities. And Paula had dismissed it all as outdated. What did Margaret say? She asked Paula about the specialized sustainable drainage systems you designed to meet federal environmental requirements. Paula said they could just put in regular storm drains like everybody else, and that all the environmental stuff was bureaucratic red tape that costs unnecessary money. I closed my eyes, imagining Margaret's reaction. She'd specifically chosen our company because of our environmental expertise. The eco-resort was her passion project, designed to prove that luxury tourism could coexist with ecological preservation. She'd spent 2 years fighting county commissioners and environmental groups to get approval for development that would actually improve the land's ecological health. Margaret gave us 48 hours to fix this situation, Dad continued. If we can't provide a viable project plan that meets the original environmental specifications by Monday morning, she's terminating the contract and demanding return of the $600,000 advance payment. $600,000 that was probably already spent on Paula's BMW and Trevor's consulting fees. She also said she's considering filing a complaint with the state licensing board about fraudulent representation of professional capabilities. That would destroy our company's reputation permanently. No one would hire a landscape architecture firm under investigation for professional fraud. Dad, you need to understand something. The Henderson project requires my specific expertise. Paula doesn't know anything about environmental compliance, and Trevor couldn't design a sustainable drainage system if his life depended on it. I know that. We all know that now. Karen, please, you have to help us. We'll lose everything if Henderson pulls out. The house, the business, everything your mother and I have worked for our entire lives. The desperation in his voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. Have you talked to Paula about fixing this? She's insisting she can handle it. She thinks Margaret is just being difficult because she's old-fashioned about environmental regulations. Paula wants to present an updated version of Trevor's designs on Monday. Updated designs from Trevor, the trust fund kid who thought native plants were weeds. Dad, I can't fix this for Paula. She's the owner now, remember? She's the one with decision-making authority. But Karen, you know this project better than anyone. You're the only one who understands the environmental requirements and the client relationship. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you transferred ownership to someone who's never worked a day in landscape architecture. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. I could hear Dad breathing, probably sitting in his office chair staring at the wall of family photos that documented better times. What do you want me to do, sweetheart? I'll do anything. Let Paula handle it. She's the heir, right? I hung up before he could respond. By noon, my phone had become a weapon of mass destruction, detonating my family's world one call at a time. The Henderson crisis was spreading through the landscape architecture community like wildfire, and our company's reputation was burning down with it. The first call came from Riverside Country Club. Their facilities manager, Robert Kim, had heard about the Henderson meeting through industry connections and wanted to express concerns about project continuity. Karen, I've worked with you personally on 3 major projects over the past 4 years, Robert said. Your attention to detail and environmental expertise are why we keep coming back. But I'm hearing troubling things about changes in your company leadership. What kind of things? That your sister is planning to sell to Greenscape Industries. You know how we feel about Greenscape's environmental standards. If they take over our contract, we'll need to find alternative arrangements. Riverside Country Club represented $800,000 in annual revenue. Their golf course restoration project had been my proudest achievement, converting chemical-dependent turf into native grasslands that supported local bird populations while still providing world-class playing conditions. I understand your concerns, Robert. You should do what's best for your club. The second call came 20 minutes later from the Mountain View Medical Center. Dr. Sarah Washington, their facilities director, was even more direct. Karen, we need to know if you're still going to be involved in our Healing Garden expansion. Our board specifically approved funding based on your track record with therapeutic landscape design. If you're not leading the project, we'll need to reconsider. The Healing Garden project was supposed to begin construction in 6 weeks. 18 months of planning, community fundraising, and collaboration with medical staff to create outdoor spaces that would aid patient recovery. Dr. Washington had fought hospital administration for 2 years to get approval for evidence-based landscape therapy design. I'm no longer in a position to guarantee my continued involvement, I told her honestly. The third call was from Oakwood Residential Development, and it was the final nail in the coffin. Their project coordinator, Jennifer Martinez, sounded genuinely sad. Karen, we just heard about the Henderson situation. Our investors are nervous about working with a company that might be acquired by Greenscape. They specifically chose your firm because of your sustainable development expertise. We're going to have to pause our project until this gets resolved. 3 major clients expressing concerns within 4 hours. In the landscape architecture world, that kind of reputation damage spread faster than Japanese knotweed. At 2:15, Paula burst into my apartment without knocking, her face flushed with anger and her hair wild like she'd been running her hands through it. "What did you do?" she demanded. I answered my phone. "Don't play innocent with me, Karen. 3 clients called today asking about your continued involvement in their projects. You're trying to sabotage me. I'm not trying to do anything, Paula. People are concerned about the Henderson meeting because word travels fast in our industry. That meeting was fine. Margaret Chen is just being difficult because she's stuck in the past. Modern landscape design doesn't need all that environmental bureaucracy. Trevor appeared behind her, looking less confident than he had on Tuesday. Paula, maybe we should consider bringing Karen back as a consultant for the transition period. No, Paula snapped. I'm not going to let her undermine my authority from day one. She's jealous because mom and dad chose me, and now she's trying to poison our clients against me. Paula, I haven't said anything negative about you to any clients. They're concerned because they know your experience level and they're worried about project quality. My experience level, I have a college degree and fresh ideas. That's more valuable than your outdated approaches. The irony was staggering. Paula thought environmental sustainability was outdated, while clients specifically hired our company because we were ahead of the curve on environmental regulations and ecological design principles. You know what? Paula continued, her voice rising to a pitch that probably alarmed the neighbors. You're fired. I don't want you anywhere near this company anymore. I already quit, Paula. I cleaned out my office on Wednesday. Good. And if I find out you're spreading lies about me to our clients, I'll sue you for intentional business interference. She stormed out, leaving Trevor behind for a moment. He looked genuinely confused and slightly panicked. Karen, between you and me, is the Henderson project really that complicated? I almost laughed. Trevor, the Henderson project requires expertise in federal environmental law, endangered species protection, watershed management, and sustainable engineering. Paula would need about 3 years of additional education just to understand the basic requirements. His face went pale. Oh! By evening, the situation had deteriorated beyond repair. Sarah Beth Martinez, our longtime project manager, called to tell me she was quitting. Karen Paula fired me for insubordination because I tried to explain that the Henderson project can't be completed without your input. Half the staff is planning to quit if you don't come back. I'm not coming back, Sarah Beth. Then neither am I. Paula hired Trevor's college roommate as the new project manager. He asked me today if we could just download landscape designs from the internet. Download designs from the internet for a $2 million environmental restoration project. My family's business was collapsing, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. More importantly, there was nothing I wanted to do to stop it. Saturday morning, I returned to the office for the last time to collect my remaining personal items. The building felt different already, like a house where someone had died. Paula's BMW sat in the parking spot that had been mine for 7 years. Its California license plates somehow making the whole place feel foreign. Inside, the chaos was immediate and obvious. Trevor had set up a makeshift workstation in the conference room surrounded by printouts that looked like they'd come from home improvement websites. His college roommate, a kid who couldn't have been older than 22, was sitting at Sarah Beth's desk, playing what appeared to be a video game on his phone. Oh, hey, you must be Karen, the kid said without looking up from his screen. Karen, I corrected. Right, cool. I'm Brandon. I'm the new project coordinator. Paula said you might stop by to hand over some files or whatever. Hand over files. 7 years of proprietary designs, client relationships, and professional expertise reduced to some files or whatever. I made my way to my former office, now stripped of everything that had made it mine. The walls looked naked without my professional certifications, project photos, and the thank you letters from satisfied clients. Paula had left a cardboard box on the desk with a note for personal items only. All business materials stay with the company. That's when I noticed the papers scattered across the printer in the hallway. Legal documents apparently forgotten in Paula's rush to establish her authority. My hand shook as I recognized what I was looking at, a letter of intent between Paula and Greenscape Industries. The sale price made my stomach drop. $4.2 million for a business that was conservatively worth $7 million, probably $8, considering our client contracts and reputation. Paula was selling our family's legacy for 60% of its actual value, and the timeline showed she'd planned this for weeks. But the real betrayal was in the details. Trevor was listed as the acquisition consultant, earning a $50,000 commission for facilitating the sale. The completion date was scheduled for 30 days after the Henderson project finished, meaning Paula had intended to use my 18 months of work to maximize the sale price before cashing out entirely. She'd never planned to run the business. She just wanted to liquidate it using my reputation and client relationships, then disappear with Trevor and the money. I took photos of every page with my phone, making sure to capture the signatures and dates. Then I quietly began removing my proprietary software from the company computers. The specialized environmental modeling programs, the client database, I'd built the digital libraries of native plant specifications and sustainable design templates. Everything Paula would need to complete existing projects, and everything that belonged to me personally rather than the business entity. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Brandon had finally looked up from his phone and noticed me working at one of the computers. "Removing my personal software licenses," I said calmly. "These programs are registered to my professional certification, not the company." Paula said all business materials have to stay here. "These aren't business materials. They're my personal professional tools, like if a carpenter took his hammers when he quit." Brandon looked confused, which seemed to be his default expression. "I should probably call Paula about this." "You should probably learn your job instead of playing games on your phone." I finished transferring the last of my files to an external drive and headed for the door. As I passed the conference room, I could see Trevor on his phone apparently arguing with someone about money. His voice carried through the thin walls. "No, Dad, it's a guaranteed commission. The sale goes through in like 6 weeks, and then I'm done with this whole thing. I'll be back in Los Angeles by Christmas." Back in Los Angeles by Christmas. Paula thought she was planning a future with Trevor, but he was already planning his escape route. I drove home with a strange sense of lightness, like I'd finally stopped carrying something heavy that I hadn't realized was weighing me down. For the first time in 7 years, I had no responsibilities to anyone but myself. No late-night emergency calls from clients, no weekend site visits, no 80-hour weeks spent solving other people's problems. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like freedom. Monday morning brought the phone call I'd been expecting since Saturday. Sarah Beth's number appeared on my screen at 7:45, 15 minutes before the Henderson development presentation that would determine my family's financial future. "Karen, you need to know what happened this weekend." "Tell me." "Oh, Paula spent all day Saturday and Sunday trying to recreate your Henderson designs using Trevor's team. When Marcus explained that your sustainable drainage system requires specialized engineering calculations, Paula told him to figure it out or find a new job." Marcus Williams was our lead environmental designer, a brilliant engineer with a master's degree in ecological restoration. He'd worked with me for 4 years, developing innovative stormwater management systems that were now being copied by firms across the region. What did Marcus say? He tried to explain that your designs incorporate proprietary methods you developed specifically for Henderson's soil conditions and topography. Paula's response was to threaten his job if he didn't stop making excuses and start finding solutions. I could picture the scene: Marcus patient and methodical, trying to explain complex environmental science to someone who thought sustainability was a marketing buzzword, while Paula grew more frustrated with each technical term she didn't understand. It gets worse, Karen. When Diana tried to show Paula the federal permitting requirements for the wildlife habitat restoration, Paula accused her of intentional sabotage and said she was probably working with you to undermine the new management. Diana Foster was our senior environmental consultant, the woman who'd taught me half of what I knew about endangered species protection and watershed management. She'd been with the company since before I started back, when Dad was still doing residential garden design and Mom handled the bookkeeping. Are they quitting? They already did. Marcus, Diana, and James submitted formal resignations this morning. They refused to put their professional licenses at risk by signing off on designs they know are inadequate. 3 of our most experienced staff members walking away from good jobs rather than participate in professional fraud. The Henderson presentation was scheduled to begin in 1 hour, and Paula had no qualified team to back up her promises. Sarah Beth, what's Paula planning to present? Trevor's shopping center, designs with some native plants added around the edges. She's calling it practical environmental enhancement and claims it meets all the same requirements as your original plan. The native plants around the edges of a conventional development, like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone and calling it surgery. She also hired 3 of Trevor's college friends as temporary creative consultants at $1,500 each per week. $4,500 weekly for unqualified college kids, while experienced professionals walked away rather than work under Paula's management. The financial hemorrhaging was accelerating faster than I'd imagined possible. There's something else, Karen. Henderson's project manager, Tom Bradley, made a surprise visit on Friday afternoon. He wanted to review the site preparation timeline and material specifications. Tom Bradley was Margaret Chen's right-hand man, a detail-oriented perfectionist who'd managed multi-million-dollar developments across 3 states. He knew quality work when he saw it, and he knew incompetence just as quickly. What did he see? Brandon trying to explain our new approach to environmental compliance. Apparently, one of Trevor's friends suggested they could just copy designs from Pinterest and modify them for the Henderson site. Pinterest for a federally regulated environmental restoration project. Tom left without saying much, but he looked concerned, really concerned. At 15 minutes into what should have been Paula's triumphant presentation to Henderson Development, my phone rang again. This time, it was Dad. Karen, please, you have to help us. How did the presentation go? It didn't. Margaret walked out after 20 minutes. Paula couldn't answer basic questions about soil engineering, water management, or environmental compliance. When Margaret asked about the endangered species habitat plan, Paula said those requirements were probably negotiable with the right permits. Endangered species protections weren't negotiable. They were federal law enforced by agencies that could shut down entire developments and impose criminal penalties for violations. Margaret's exact words were, "This company clearly lacks the expertise to complete our project safely and legally. We'll be terminating our contract and exploring legal remedies for misrepresentation." Legal remedies for misrepresentation. Margaret was considering suing us for fraud. Dad, I tried to warn you this would happen. I know. We all know. Paula's locked herself in the office and won't talk to anyone. Trevor's been on the phone with his father for an hour, probably asking for money to cover his commission loss. What do you want me to do? Oh, fix this. Please, I don't care what it costs or what we have to agree to. We'll lose everything if Henderson follows through on their threats. I looked out my apartment window at the city I'd spent 7 years beautifying one sustainable project at a time. Somewhere out there, families were enjoying parks I'd designed, patients were healing in therapeutic gardens I'd created, and wildlife was thriving in habitats I'd restored. That work had value beyond money, meaning beyond family politics. Let Paula handle it, Dad. She's the heir, right? The silence that followed was filled with the sound of a man realizing that his mistakes had consequences he couldn't undo. The knock on my door came at 11:30 that night, urgent and desperate. Through the peephole, I could see Dad standing in the hallway, his shoulders slumped and his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Dad, it's almost midnight. I know, I'm sorry. Can I come in, please? He looked older than I'd ever seen him, worn down by a day that had probably aged him 5 years. I let him in and made coffee while he sat at my kitchen table staring at his hands like they held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. Paula spent $40,000 in company funds over the past month, he said finally. I set down the coffee mug harder than I'd intended. $40,000. Luxury apartment lease in the downtown district, $2,400 a month. Designer furniture from that high-end place on 5th Street. A BMW lease for Trevor. All charged to the business credit card. The downtown apartment lease alone was more than most of our employees made in a month. Our project managers, people with engineering degrees and professional certifications, earned less than Paula was spending on rent for an apartment she'd live in for a few weeks before cashing out and moving back to California. The business checking account has insufficient funds to meet Friday's payroll. 3 major suppliers have sent past due notices. Our insurance payment bounced, and our professional liability coverage lapsed yesterday. Professional liability coverage. Without that insurance, we couldn't legally operate as a landscape architecture firm. Every project we'd signed contracts for was now in violation of state regulations. How much does the company owe? Including the Henderson advance. We'll have to repay the supplier invoices and the payroll we can't meet, about $800,000. $800,000 in debt after 30 years of profitable operation. Paula had destroyed our family's financial stability in less than a month. What did Paula say when you confronted her about the spending? Dad's laugh was bitter and tired. She said the expenses were necessary investments in transitioning the business to modern standards. When I told her we couldn't afford to pay our employees, she said I should transfer money from my and your mother's retirement savings to bridge the gap until the sale closes. And when you hesitated, she threatened to cut us out entirely, said she could get financing from Trevor's family instead, and that we'd be lucky if she let us keep the house after everything was settled. The house where I'd grown up, where my parents had lived for 28 years, where they'd planned to spend their retirement. Paula was using it as leverage to extort money from her own parents. Dad Trevor's family isn't going to give Paula money. I saw the Greenscape documents. Trevor's getting a commission from the sale, but he's planning to be back in Los Angeles before Christmas. He's using Paula to get paid, then he's disappearing. You saw documents. I showed him the photos I'd taken of the letter of intent. Dad's face went white as he read the sale price, the timeline, and Trevor's role as a paid facilitator. She never intended to run the business, I said gently. This was always about cashing out as quickly as possible. But the family legacy, everything we built together, meant nothing to her dad. Paula saw the business as her inheritance to spend, not her responsibility to maintain. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of 30 years of family history settling between us like dust on abandoned furniture. Outside, the city slept peacefully, unaware that one family's American dream was collapsing in a downtown apartment kitchen. Karen, I know we have no right to ask this after what we did to you, but please, help us save what we built together. What exactly are you asking me to do? Come back. Take over the business operations. Fix the Henderson situation. We'll figure out the ownership issues later, but right now we just need someone who knows how to run the company. And Paula? I'll handle Paula. I looked at my father, this man who taught me to work with my hands, to solve problems through patience and persistence, to build something lasting and meaningful. He'd made a terrible mistake born from misguided love and favoritism. But he wasn't a bad man. He was just a father who'd tried to solve one daughter's problems by sacrificing the other daughter's future. Dad, I can't come back to work for Paula, and I can't fix 7 years of client relationships that she's destroyed in a week. Then what do we do? I thought about Margaret Chen, who trusted our company with her passion project and been betrayed by incompetence and fraud. I thought about the 3 clients who'd called expressing concerns and the employees who'd quit rather than compromise their professional integrity. Let Paula handle it. She's the heir, right? Dad's shoulders sagged as he realized I was serious. Karen, please. Don't let our family destroy itself over my mistake. I'm not destroying anything, Dad. I'm just not going to sacrifice my life to clean up Paula's mess. He left a few minutes later, walking slowly to his car like a man carrying the weight of the world. I watched from my window as he sat in the driver's seat for several minutes before starting the engine, probably trying to figure out how to tell Mom that their daughter had chosen her own future over their family's survival. For the first time in 7 years, that choice felt like the right one. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. Margaret Chen's name appeared on my personal cell phone at 8:15. While I was enjoying my 3rd consecutive day of sleeping past 6 o'clock for the first time since college. Karen, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. I got your number from our previous correspondence about the eco-resort project. Of course, Margaret. How can I help you? I think the question is how I can help you. Are you available to meet for lunch today? I have a proposition that might interest you. Margaret Chen was one of the most respected developers in the region, known for projects that balanced profitability with environmental responsibility. She didn't make social calls or waste time on unimportant meetings. I'd be happy to meet with you. Excellent. Noon at the Riverside Cafe, and Karen, come prepared to discuss your future, not your past. The Riverside Cafe sat overlooking the urban park I designed 3 years earlier, where native wildflowers now bloomed, where there had once been sterile grass and decorative shrubs. Through the window, I could see families enjoying the interactive water features that taught children about natural watershed systems while they played. Margaret arrived precisely at noon, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of success in a male-dominated industry. Thank you for meeting me on short notice, she said, settling into the booth across from me. I wanted to discuss the situation with your family's business, and more importantly, your role in it. Margaret, I should clarify that I'm no longer involved with the company. Paula is the owner now, and she's making all decisions about current projects. Yes, I'm aware of the ownership transfer. I'm also aware that your sister lacks the expertise to complete our project, and that your parents made a significant error in judgment. Margaret had always been direct, but her bluntness was still startling. I've spent the past 3 days reviewing our contract and exploring our legal options, she continued. Technically, we could terminate for breach of professional standards and demand return of our advance payment. We could also file complaints with the state licensing board about misrepresentation of capabilities. That would destroy the business entirely. Yes, it would, which brings me to my proposition. Margaret opened a leather portfolio and placed a document on the table between us. Henderson Development wants to offer you an exclusive 3-year consulting agreement. You would complete the current eco-resort project and design 2 additional sustainable developments we're planning in Colorado and Oregon. The total contract value is $5 million with performance bonuses that could bring it to $6 million. $5 million, more money than I'd ever imagined earning in my entire career, offered for work I was uniquely qualified to perform. The contract would be directly between Henderson Development and you personally, completely separate from your family's business. We'd cover all legal costs if your sister attempts any litigation, and we'd provide startup funding for you to establish your own firm. Margaret, this is incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I'm ready to start my own company. Karen, you've been running a company for 7 years. The only difference would be that you'd finally get paid for it and have control over your own decisions. She was right, of course. I'd been handling all the complex project management, client relations, and technical design work that made the business successful. The only things I'd never done were own the results of my efforts and enjoy the financial benefits of my expertise. There's one more thing you should know, Margaret said. Word of this offer has already reached Greenscape Industries. They're reconsidering their acquisition timeline because they realize the company's value was largely dependent on your involvement. How do you know that? Because their acquisition manager called me yesterday asking whether Henderson would be interested in maintaining our contract if Greenscape completed the purchase. When I told him we work exclusively with firms that prioritize environmental expertise over profit margins, he became very quiet. Greenscape's entire interest in our company had been based on acquiring our client relationships and environmental reputation. Without me, they were buying an empty shell with massive debts and no qualified staff. You have 72 hours to decide, Margaret said, standing to leave. But Karen, I want you to understand something. Talent like yours shouldn't be trapped by family politics. You have the opportunity to build something extraordinary on your own terms. She left me sitting in the cafe staring at a contract that represented everything I dreamed of having: professional recognition, financial security, and the freedom to create meaningful environmental projects without interference from people who didn't understand or value the work. Through the window, children were still playing in the park I designed their laughter, carrying across water features that would teach them to love and protect the natural world. That was the kind of legacy I wanted to build. Not a business inherited through family favoritism, but a career earned through competence and dedication. For the first time since finding those papers on Dad's desk, I felt genuinely excited about my future. Thursday evening arrived with the sound of angry voices in my apartment building's hallway. Through the door, I could hear Paula's voice rising in pitch the way it had when we were children and she wasn't getting her way. The knock that followed was sharp and demanding, the kind of sound that suggested the visitor had no intention of being ignored. I opened the door to find Paula, Trevor, and Mom standing in my hallway like some kind of intervention committee. Paula's eyes were red and puffy, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and her hands shook as she clutched a piece of paper that looked suspiciously like a pregnancy test. "We need to talk," Paula said, pushing past me into my apartment without invitation. Trevor followed, looking less confident than he had the previous week. His designer clothes seemed wilted somehow, and he kept checking his phone like he was expecting important news that wasn't coming. "Paula, what's this about?" "I know about Henderson's offer," she said, turning to face me with an expression that mixed desperation with fury. "You can't accept it." "And why is that?" "Because all of your designs belong to the family business. Every project you worked on, every client relationship you built, every proprietary method you developed was done as an employee of our company. If you try to use that intellectual property to compete with us, I'll sue you for theft." Trevor nodded eagerly. "My dad's attorney says we have a strong case for corporate espionage and breach of fiduciary duty." Corporate espionage, for using my own expertise to earn a living. "Besides," Paula continued, holding up the pregnancy test with trembling hands, "I'm pregnant with Trevor's baby. I need this business to provide financial security for my child." The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, and Paula's voice broke as she continued speaking. "This isn't just about me anymore, Karen. It's about my baby's future. Your niece or nephew deserves to inherit the family legacy that Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank built from nothing." Mom stepped forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Karen, honey, you can't steal from your unborn niece or nephew. Family takes care of family." "I'm not stealing anything. I'm accepting a job offer based on my professional qualifications." "Those qualifications were developed using company resources," Trevor interjected. "Paula's attorney says any court would recognize that your expertise belongs to the business that funded your training and experience." "Paula, let me ask you something. When did you find out you were pregnant?" "Yesterday morning." "And when did you find out about Henderson's offer?" "Tuesday afternoon." So the pregnancy happened to be discovered one day after you learned I might be leaving to start my own firm. Paula's face flushed red. Are you suggesting I'm lying about being pregnant? I'm suggesting the timing is convenient. Trevor stepped closer, his voice taking on a threatening tone. Karen, you need to understand something. My family has connections throughout this industry. If you try to compete with Paula's business, we can make sure no one will hire you. We know people at every major development company, every licensing board, every professional organization that matters. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You can be reasonable and work with us, or you can be stubborn and destroy your own career. Paula wiped her eyes and tried a different approach, her voice becoming soft and pleading. Karen, I know we haven't been close since college, but we're sisters. Sisters support each other. I'm offering you 20% ownership if you sign a non-compete agreement and help complete the sale to Greenscape. 20% of a business I'd built from 3 employees to 35, offered like a generous gift from someone who'd inherited 100% through family favoritism. And if your baby is born healthy, you'll name her Rose after Grandma. Yes, Paula said eagerly, if there's still a family business to inherit. The manipulation was breathtaking in its transparency. The convenient pregnancy, the threat of professional retaliation, the emotional appeal about family loyalty, the promise of limited ownership in exchange for surrendering my career independence. Paula was using every weapon in her arsenal to keep me trapped in a supporting role while she cashed out and disappeared. Paula, I need to ask you something and I want an honest answer. Do you actually want to run a landscape architecture business? Of course I do. Then why are you planning to sell it to Greenscape in 6 weeks? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that couldn't be hidden anymore. Paula's face went white, and Trevor suddenly became very interested in studying my apartment's ceiling. I don't know what you're talking about. I saw the letter of intent, Paula. I know about Trevor's $50,000 commission and the timeline for liquidating the business. You never intended to build a career in landscape architecture. You just wanted to cash out using my client relationships and reputation. Mom looked confused and hurt. Paula, is this true? Mom, it's complicated. The sale would give us the capital to start fresh somewhere else. Maybe California, where Trevor's family has business connections. You mean where Trevor plans to disappear once he gets paid for facilitating the sale? Trevor's phone buzzed and he glanced at it with an expression of panic. I should take this. It's about the Greenscape timeline. He stepped into my hallway to take the call, leaving Paula and Mom to stare at each other across the wreckage of their family unity. Paula, I said gently, do you really want to have a baby with someone who's already planning his escape route? She didn't answer, but the tears that started falling suggested she was beginning to understand how thoroughly she'd been manipulated by everyone, including herself. Friday morning, I sat in the office of corporate attorney Lisa Rodriguez, watching her review the business transfer documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. Lisa came highly recommended by Margaret Chen, and her reputation for handling complex business disputes was exactly what I needed. This is fascinating, Lisa said, flipping through the pages for the 3rd time. And by fascinating, I mean legally problematic for everyone involved except you. What do you mean? Your family's business was structured as a limited liability company, correct? With you listed as a managing member since you obtained your professional landscape architecture license. Yes, that was required by state regulations. Professional services companies need a licensed professional in a management role. Exactly. And here's where your father made a critical error. Lisa pointed to a section of the transfer documents. He signed over ownership to Paula without obtaining consent from all managing members. According to your company's operating agreement, this type of ownership transfer requires unanimous approval from the board. My heart started beating faster. Are you saying the transfer isn't legal? I'm saying the transfer is potentially invalid. Your father didn't have sole authority to make this decision. As a managing member and licensed professional, you had veto power over major structural changes to the business. Lisa pulled out another set of documents from her files. There's more. I reviewed the copyright registrations for your proprietary design methods and environmental assessment tools. 7 of your most innovative approaches were filed under your personal name, not the business entity. I didn't realize that mattered. It matters enormously. Paula can't claim ownership of intellectual property that was never owned by the company. Your sustainable drainage systems, your wildlife habitat restoration protocols, your native plant integration methods. Those belong to you personally. The implications were staggering. Not only was Paula's ownership claim potentially invalid, but she also had no legal right to the expertise that made the business valuable. What would you recommend as next steps? File for an emergency injunction to halt any sale negotiations with Greenscape Industries. Challenge the ownership transfer on procedural grounds, and prepare for Paula to escalate this into a full legal battle. How strong is our case? Very strong. Business law is clear about procedural requirements for ownership transfers. Your father violated the company's operating agreement, possibly invalidating the entire transaction. Lisa leaned back in her chair, studying me with the expression of someone calculating odds and probabilities. Karen, there's something else you should consider. If we successfully challenge Paula's ownership claim, you wouldn't just get your share back. Given Paula's mismanagement, her unauthorized spending, and her attempted sale of company assets, you could potentially claim majority control based on breach of fiduciary duties. Majority control. Paula has violated virtually every responsibility that comes with business ownership. Unauthorized expenditures, misrepresentation to clients, destruction of professional relationships, violation of employment contracts. Any court would question her fitness to manage a professional services company. The possibility was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd spent 7 years building the business under my parents' ownership, accepting their authority and their decisions. The idea of having final control over the company's direction felt like stepping into a completely different life. What about Paula's pregnancy? Personal circumstances don't override business law. If anything, her decision to make major financial commitments while planning to liquidate the business demonstrates poor judgment. And Trevor's threats about his family's industry connections? Lisa's laugh was sharp and unsympathetic. Professional retaliation threats are actually evidence of attempted intimidation in business disputes. If Trevor's family tries to interfere with your career opportunities, they'd be opening themselves to substantial liability for restraint of trade. How long would this process take? Emergency injunction could be granted within 72 hours if we file today. Full resolution of the ownership dispute might take several months, but you'd be operating the business during that period. I thought about Margaret Chen's offer still sitting on my kitchen table like a golden ticket to independence. I thought about Henderson Development waiting for someone qualified to complete their eco-resort project. I thought about the employees who'd quit rather than work under Paula's management and the clients who'd expressed concerns about the company's future. Lisa, what happens to existing contracts if we challenge Paula's authority? As a managing member and licensed professional, you'd have legal standing to fulfill the company's contractual obligations. Henderson Development would probably be relieved to work with someone who actually understands their project requirements. And if Paula fights this, she'll lose. Business law isn't about fairness or family relationships. It's about following proper procedures and meeting professional standards. Paula failed on both counts. I left Lisa's office with a thick folder of legal documents and a decision deadline of Monday morning. She'd prepared everything necessary to file the emergency injunction pending my final authorization. Walking to my car, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads with two completely different futures stretching ahead of me. One path led to independence, starting fresh with Margaret Chen's offer and building my own company from scratch. The other path led back to my family's business, but this time as a person with a final authority over every decision. Both options offered something I'd never had before: control over my own professional destiny. The question was, which future would make me happier in 20 years when I looked back on this moment that changed everything? Lisa's call came at 7:30 Monday morning, her voice crisp with legal authority and barely contained satisfaction. Emergency LLC meeting is scheduled for 10 o'clock this morning at the downtown conference center. I've sent proper legal notice to all parties, and attendance is mandatory under the operating agreement. How did Paula react to the notice? Let's just say her attorney earned his retainer this weekend. She's bringing David Morrison from Morrison Webb and Associates. He specializes in business disputes and charges $400 an hour. $400 an hour. Paula was spending money she didn't have to fight a legal battle she couldn't win, funded by Trevor's family connections. Any idea what her strategy will be? Probably to claim your challenge is motivated by jealousy and spite, argue that the business transfer was a valid family decision, and suggest that your parents have the right to distribute their assets as they see fit. And our response? Business law, procedural requirements, documentation of violations. Facts don't care about family feelings. The conference center downtown was the kind of sterile corporate space where careers and fortunes were decided by people in expensive suits, arguing over documents most people would find incomprehensibly boring. Paula arrived 10 minutes early with Trevor and her attorney, a thin man with silver hair and the kind of expensive watch that suggested his legal services came with premium pricing. Dad and Mom arrived together, both looking like they hadn't slept well in days. Mom's eyes were red from crying, and Dad moved like a man who'd aged a decade in the past week. Before we begin, David Morrison announced, opening a leather briefcase, I want to establish that this meeting was called under questionable authority by someone who no longer has standing in this business entity. Mr. Morrison, Lisa replied calmly, my client remains a managing member under the original operating agreement until that status is legally changed through proper procedures. Those procedures were not followed in the attempted ownership transfer. The transfer was a valid family decision made by the company's founder and majority owner. Douglas Martinez was never the sole owner with unilateral transfer authority. The operating agreement clearly states that structural changes require unanimous consent from all managing members. Paula leaned forward, her voice tight with emotion. This is ridiculous. Dad built this business from nothing. He has the right to leave it to whichever daughter he chooses. Actually, Paula, he doesn't, Lisa said, spreading documents across the conference table. Business entities have legal structures that supersede personal preferences. Your father violated the company's governing documents when he transferred ownership without proper authorization. Morrison tried a different approach. Even if there were procedural irregularities, the transfer has been in effect for 6 months. My client has made substantial investments in the business based on her rightful ownership. Oh, substantial investments like $40,000 in personal expenses, Lisa countered. Luxury apartment leases, vehicle leases for non-employees, designer furniture purchases. Those aren't business investments. They're personal expenditures using corporate funds. The room fell silent as the financial mismanagement was laid out in black and white. Paula's face flushed red, while Trevor suddenly became very interested in studying his phone. Furthermore, Lisa continued, Paula's attempted sale to Greenscape Industries was negotiated without proper authorization and would have resulted in substantial undervaluation of company assets. The Greenscape sale was a strategic business decision, Morrison argued weakly. At 60% of market value with a $50,000 commission paid to Paula's boyfriend, that's not strategic business planning, that's liquidation for personal profit. Then came the moment that changed everything. Mom, who had been sitting quietly beside Dad, suddenly stood up and walked to the head of the conference table. "I need to say something." Morrison looked annoyed at the interruption. "Mrs. Martinez, this is a formal legal proceeding. Unless you have official standing..." "I'm a founding member of this business and a signatory on the operating agreement," Mom said firmly. "I have every right to speak." She turned to face Paula with tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. "Paula, honey, I love you, but I never wanted to give you the business permanently." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Paula's mouth fell open, and Trevor looked up from his phone in shock. "What do you mean, Mom?" Paula whispered. "Your father told me the transfer was temporary, a test period to see if you could handle the responsibility. He said we'd eventually give both you and Karen equal shares once you'd proven yourself capable." Dad's face went white. "Janet, we agreed." "We agreed to help Paula grow up Douglas, not to destroy Karen's future and bankrupt our family." Mom pulled out a folder from her purse. "I've been documenting everything, Paula. The financial mismanagement, Trevor's inappropriate influence, the damage to client relationships. I suspected this would end badly." She handed the folder to Lisa. Bank statements showing the unauthorized expenditures, email correspondence with Greenscape Industries, records of employee resignations and client complaints. I kept everything. Morrison looked stunned. The case he'd expected to argue based on family loyalty and parental authority had just collapsed, as one parent testified against the ownership transfer. "Mrs. Martinez," Lisa said carefully, "are you stating for the record that you oppose Paula's continued ownership of the business?" "I'm stating that I want what's best for both my daughters and for the business their father and I spent 30 years building. Paula isn't ready for this responsibility, and Karen deserves better than what we gave her." Paula broke down crying, not the manipulative tears she'd used in my apartment, but genuine sobs of someone realizing that her life was falling apart. With Mrs. Martinez's testimony and supporting documentation, Lisa announced, "We have clear grounds for invalidating the ownership transfer and restoring proper management structure to this business entity." Morrison whispered something urgent in Paula's ear, then addressed the room. "My client requests a 15-minute recess to discuss settlement options." During the recess, Trevor made a phone call that I could hear through the conference room's thin walls. "Dad, the legal situation is worse than we thought. The ownership transfer might be completely invalid. No, the commission isn't guaranteed anymore. I think I need to come home." When the meeting reconvened, Morrison looked like a man who just lost a case he'd expected to win easily. "In light of new information, my client is prepared to negotiate a settlement that recognizes all parties' legitimate interests in this business." "What kind of settlement?" Lisa asked. Paula spoke for herself, her voice small and defeated. "I want Karen to have the business. I never really wanted to run it anyway. I thought it would solve all my problems." The legal victory felt less satisfying than I'd expected. Instead of triumph, I felt sad for Paula, who'd been manipulated by Trevor and failed by parents who'd tried to solve her problems by creating mine. But I also felt something else, relief that the business I'd spent 7 years building would finally belong to someone who understood its value. Wednesday morning, I walked into the office building as the legal owner of the landscape architecture firm for the first time in my life. The parking lot felt different when I knew I had the authority to make decisions without asking permission or explaining myself to people who didn't understand the work. My first call was to Margaret Chen, confirming my new legal status and my commitment to completing Henderson Development's eco-resort project under the original specifications. "Congratulations on resolving your family's business issues," Margaret said. "I assume this means you'll be declining our exclusive consulting offer." Actually, I'd like to discuss modifying your proposal. What if Henderson Development became the anchor client for an expanded version of our existing company rather than hiring me as an independent consultant? I'm listening. Your 3-project contract would provide the financial foundation for us to grow from 35 employees to 60 or 70 over the next 4 years. We could become the premier sustainable landscape architecture firm in the region, handling multiple large-scale environmental restoration projects simultaneously. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating the advantages of working with an established company versus a startup consultant. The contract value would remain the same. The same, but you'd get a more robust support team, established vendor relationships, and proven project management systems. Plus, we could handle larger and more complex projects than a single consultant could manage. When can you present a formal proposal? Friday morning. I'll be there, and Karen, I'm going to introduce you to my colleagues at Chen Development Corporation and Pacific Eco Resorts. They're planning sustainable development projects that could triple your contract volume if you're ready for that level of growth. Triple the contract volume. Henderson's $5 million could become $15 million over 4 years, transforming our small family business into a major regional player in sustainable development. My second call was to Sarah Beth Martinez, who answered on the first ring. Karen, I heard about the legal settlement. Are you really back in charge? Completely in charge. Want your job back? When do I start? How about now? We have a Henderson Development presentation to prepare for Friday, and I need to know which of our former employees might be interested in returning. Marcus, Diana, and James have been hoping you'd call. They're all available immediately. Should I reach out to them? Please. And Sarah Beth, we're going to be hiring 20 to 30 new people over the next year. I want you to start thinking about expanding our project management capabilities. By noon, the office was buzzing with activity for the first time in 2 weeks. Marcus Williams arrived with design proposals he'd been developing on his own time, convinced that the Henderson project could be saved with a proper environmental expertise. Diana Foster brought updated federal permitting documents and a list of regulatory contacts who could expedite our compliance approvals. James Patterson had spent his unemployment week researching new sustainable materials and construction techniques that could enhance our environmental impact. Karen, Marcus said, spreading his drawings across the conference table, I've been thinking about the Henderson drainage system. What if we incorporated bioswales with permeable hardscaping to create an integrated stormwater management network that's also aesthetically beautiful? This was the kind of innovative thinking that made our company special. Marcus understood that environmental sustainability and visual appeal weren't competing priorities, but complementary aspects of superior landscape design. I love it. Can you have detailed specifications ready for Friday's presentation? Already working on them. Diana had even better news. I contacted the State Environmental Review Board about expediting Henderson's permitting process. Since our project actually improves the ecological health of the development site, they're willing to fast-track the approvals. How fast? 6 weeks instead of 6 months if we submit complete documentation by the end of this month. The transformation was remarkable. After 2 weeks of chaos under Paula's management, we were functioning like the professional team we'd always been. People knew their roles, understood the client's needs, and were excited about creating something meaningful. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang with the call I'd been both expecting and dreading. Corin, this is Tom Bradley from Henderson Development. I wanted to personally confirm that you're back in charge of our project. Yes, Tom. I'm the legal owner now, and we're fully committed to completing your eco-resort according to the original environmental specifications. Excellent. Margaret asked me to tell you that she's accelerating our contract timeline. If your team can deliver the quality of work we've seen from you in the past, Henderson Development wants to begin construction on the Colorado and Oregon projects immediately. how immediately site preparation for the Colorado project starts in January, assuming your designs are approved by our environmental consultants. Oregon follows in March. 3 major projects running simultaneously. It was the kind of growth opportunity that could establish our company as a leader in sustainable development, but it would require careful planning and significant staff expansion. Tom will be ready. You can count on that. After hanging up, I looked around the office that finally felt like mine. Employees were working with energy, and purpose phones were ringing with client inquiries, and project plans were taking shape on drafting tables throughout the building. For the first time in my professional life, I was building something that belonged to me, something that reflected my values and expertise, something that would grow because of my decisions rather than despite them. The satisfaction was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Thursday evening brought an unexpected visitor to my apartment. Paula stood in my hallway looking smaller somehow, wearing a simple sweater and jeans instead of her usual carefully curated California style. Her eyes were red, but not from the manipulative tears she'd used during our confrontation. These were the tears of someone who'd finally seen herself clearly. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need to tell you something important." I let her in, noting that Trevor was nowhere to be seen. Paula sat on my couch carefully, like someone who was physically and emotionally exhausted. "Trevor left this morning," she said without preamble, "back to Los Angeles. His father's law firm decided the Greenscape deal was too risky to support, and Trevor decided I was too risky to support." "I'm sorry, Paula." "Don't be. You were right about him, about everything." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. I found these yesterday while he was in the shower. The messages were between Trevor and someone named Chad, apparently one of his college friends. The content was brutal in its casual cruelty. "How much longer do you have to pretend to care about the pregnant sister? Not pregnant anymore. Turned out to be a false positive. Thank God. So you're dumping her as soon as the legal stuff gets settled. Paula's a useful idiot with rich parents, but I'm not spending my life in some boring suburban landscape business. What about the baby plan? Never wanted kids anyway. I just told her what she wanted to hear to keep her focused on the sale." "Paula, he was using me from the beginning," she said, her voice matter-of-fact rather than bitter. "The pregnancy was a false positive. I was so desperate to create a reason for keeping the business that I convinced myself it was real even after I knew it wasn't." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we could cross. "I owe you an apology that's bigger than words can express," Paula continued. "I was jealous of you. I've been jealous of you since we were kids, and instead of dealing with that like an adult, I let Mom and Dad enable my worst impulses." "Jealous of what?" "Your competence, your work ethic, the way clients and employees respected you, the way Mom and Dad were obviously proud of what you'd accomplished even when they were giving me the business." This was the most honest conversation Paula and I had shared since high school, maybe since childhood. "I never wanted to run a landscape architecture company," she admitted. "I don't understand environmental science. I don't care about sustainable design, and I definitely don't want to work 80-hour weeks solving other people's problems." "Then what do you want?" "I want to find something I'm actually good at. Something that matters. Something that isn't just handed to me because my parents feel sorry for me." Paula pulled out another document from her purse. "I've applied to the community college's business administration program. Evening classes so I can work during the day. I want to learn how businesses actually function instead of just expecting to inherit one." That's a good start. "There's more. I've been researching nonprofit management and environmental education. I think maybe I could contribute to what you're building, but in a different way." What kind of way?" "Community outreach, educational programs, grant writing for environmental projects. The artistic background I have might actually be useful for creating materials that teach kids about environmental conservation. The idea had merit. Environmental education was increasingly important for building public support for sustainable development, and our company could benefit from having someone dedicated to community engagement and public relations. Paula, I appreciate that you're thinking about this seriously, but I need to be honest. You'd have to start at entry level, prove yourself through consistent performance, and accept that I make all final decisions about company direction. I understand. And Karen, I want you to know that even if you decide not to hire me, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You built something amazing, and I almost destroyed it because I was too immature to handle my own life. The transformation was remarkable. This was the sister I remembered from childhood before competition and parental favoritism had poisoned our relationship. Paula was finally taking responsibility for her choices and their consequences. There's one more thing, she said. I want to pay back the $40,000 I spent on personal expenses. It'll take me a while, but I've already canceled the luxury apartment lease and returned most of the furniture. Trevor can deal with his own car payments. Paula, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. I stole from the business and I need to make it right, even if it takes me 5 years to pay it back. After Paula left, I sat in my kitchen thinking about forgiveness, family relationships, and second chances. Paula had made terrible decisions that nearly destroyed our family's legacy, but she was also a 28-year-old woman who'd been enabled and manipulated by everyone around her, including me. I'd been so focused on being the responsible daughter that I'd never helped Paula develop her own sense of responsibility. In some ways, our family's favoritism had hurt her as much as it had hurt me, just in different ways. Maybe it was time for both of us to start over. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt different this time. Instead of the weekly obligation it had become, the gathering carried the tentative hope of a family trying to rebuild relationships they'd nearly destroyed. Dad greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted longer than usual, his way of apologizing without words for choices that had nearly cost us everything. Mom bustled around the kitchen with nervous energy, preparing enough food for twice as many people as would be eating it. Paula should be here soon, Mom said, checking the pot roast for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. She's taking the bus now since she gave up that expensive car. Paula arrived punctually, carrying a folder of documents and wearing the kind of practical clothes someone wears when they're more concerned with function than fashion. She looked healthier somehow, more grounded and present than I'd seen her in years. I brought the financial restitution plan, she announced, setting the folder on the kitchen counter. I calculated exactly what I owe the business and created a payment schedule that works with my community college expenses and part-time job income. Part-time job? Dad asked. Garden center downtown, 20 hours a week, learning about native plants and sustainable gardening practices. It's not glamorous, but it's relevant to what I want to contribute to environmental education. This was a Paula I barely recognized, practical, forward-thinking, taking responsibility for her own growth instead of expecting others to solve her problems. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty. Are you sure you don't want to consider other options? Your father and I could help you find something more suitable. Mom working retail in a garden center is suitable for someone who needs to learn about plants and customer service from the ground up. I'm not taking shortcuts anymore. The transformation was remarkable and slightly unsettling. Part of me wondered if this new responsible Paula was genuine or another performance designed to manipulate family sympathy. We're speaking of new directions, Dad said, settling into his usual chair at the head of the table. Your mother and I have been discussing how we can support what you're building, Karen, without interfering with your authority. What kind of support? Financial investment in the business expansion, Mom said. We want to mortgage the house to provide startup capital for the Henderson projects. The offer was generous and completely unnecessary. Mom, I appreciate the gesture, but the business is profitable enough to fund its own growth. You don't need to risk your home. But we want to contribute, Dad insisted. This business is still our family's legacy, even if it's under your control now. Actually, I have a different idea, I said, pulling out my own folder of documents. What if instead of giving me money, you let me invest in your future? I spread architectural drawings across the dining room table, plans for converting their backyard and surrounding property into a demonstration sustainable landscape that would showcase our company's capabilities. Us a living laboratory, I explained. Native plant gardens, rainwater, harvesting systems, permeable hardscaping wildlife habitat areas. It would serve as a model for residential environmental design while allowing you to stay in your home. Dad studied the drawings with growing excitement. This is brilliant, Karen. Potential clients could visit and see exactly what sustainable residential landscaping looks like. Plus, we could host educational programs here, Paula added, community workshops on native gardening, children's environmental education demonstration projects for local schools. And the best part, I continued, is that it would establish this property as a certified environmental demonstration site. That certification would increase your home's value substantially while creating a permanent educational resource. Mom's eyes lit up with understanding. So instead of risking our financial security to help your business, we'd be improving our property while supporting your company's educational mission. Exactly. And if you want to contribute to the business operations, Dad, I'd love to have you work part-time as a senior consultant. Your client relationships and industry experience would be valuable for our expansion. Senior consultant, Dad repeated, obviously pleased with the title. I like the sound of that. Paula cleared her throat nervously. Karen, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything after what I did, but I've been developing some ideas for the educational program side of the business. She pulled out a presentation folder with hand-drawn illustrations and carefully written program descriptions. Environmental education workshops for elementary schools, community garden design assistance for low-income neighborhoods, grant-funded restoration projects that train local residents in sustainable landscape management. The programs she'd outlined were thoughtful, well-researched, and directly relevant to our company's environmental mission. More importantly, they represented work Paula could do competently while contributing real value to our operations. This could work, I said carefully, but you'd need to complete your business administration coursework first, and you'd start as an entry-level coordinator reporting to our education program manager. I understand, and I want to pay for the position through performance, not family connections. What about your art background? Mom asked. Surely that has value for educational materials and community outreach. It does, Paula acknowledged. I can create visual materials, design educational displays, and help develop public presentation content. But I want to earn my place by being useful, not by being your daughter. The conversation continued through dinner and into the evening, with all of us gradually realizing that our family relationships might actually be stronger after surviving this crisis than they'd been before it started. For the first time in years, we were talking to each other honestly about our individual strengths, weaknesses, and aspirations, instead of tiptoeing around assumed roles and unspoken resentments. As I drove home that night, I thought about the different ways families can support each other. The version where parents try to solve one child's problems by sacrificing another child's opportunities creates resentment and dependency. But the version where each person contributes their authentic strengths to shared goals can build something lasting and meaningful. Maybe we were finally learning the difference. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the state's Environmental Excellence Awards ceremony, looking out at an audience of landscape architects, environmental engineers, and sustainable development professionals from across the region. The weight of the Crystal Award in my hands felt like validation for every late night, every difficult client meeting, and every moment I doubted whether fighting for my own future had been worth the cost. Sustainable Landscape Solutions, the presenter had announced, has demonstrated exceptional innovation in ecological restoration and environmental education. Their Henderson Development Eco-Resort project has become a model for sustainable tourism development, proving that luxury and environmental responsibility can coexist beautifully. Our company had grown from 35 employees to 52 in 6 months, with projects in 3 states and a waiting list of potential clients who wanted our expertise in sustainable development. The Henderson project had exceeded every environmental goal we'd set, creating habitat for 6 endangered species while providing a luxury resort experience that enhanced rather than degraded the natural landscape. I want to thank Henderson Development for believing in our vision, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the banquet hall. And I want to thank my team for their dedication to proving that environmental protection and economic development can work together. In the audience, I could see Margaret Chen nodding approvingly, flanked by representatives from Chen Development Corporation and Pacific Eco Resorts. Our expanded contracts with their companies had secured our financial future while advancing sustainable development practices across the region. But most importantly, I continued, I want to acknowledge that this award represents more than professional achievement. It represents the power of authentic family support and the importance of earning your place through competence rather than inheriting it through favoritism. At a table near the front, Mom and Dad beamed with pride. Their property had been certified as an environmental demonstration site the previous month, attracting visitors from universities and environmental organizations throughout the state. Dad's role as senior consultant had proved invaluable for managing client relationships during our rapid expansion. Beside them sat Paula, wearing a simple black dress and taking notes on the ceremony for the newsletter she now produced for our company's educational outreach program. She'd graduated from her business administration coursework with honors 3 weeks earlier and had been promoted to environmental education coordinator after securing 2 major grant contracts for community environmental education. The most important lesson I've learned, I said, feeling the emotion rise in my voice, is that true family legacy isn't about inheritance or entitlement. It's about each person finding their authentic contribution and earning their place through genuine effort and growth. Paula had found her place by developing educational programs that taught children and community members about environmental stewardship. Her artistic background combined with business training had created innovative approaches to environmental education that were being replicated by other organizations across the state. When I thought I was losing everything 6 months ago, I was actually gaining the opportunity to build something far greater than what I could have inherited. I was gaining the confidence to demand what I deserved and the freedom to create work that truly mattered. The audience included several former employees who'd quit during Paula's disastrous management period and had returned to join our expanded team. Marcus Williams now led our environmental engineering department. Diana Foster directed our federal compliance division. James Patterson managed our sustainable materials research program. Most importantly, I continued, I learned that protecting your boundaries and demanding respect actually strengthens family relationships rather than destroying them. Love means supporting each person's individual strengths rather than trying to force an artificial equality through misguided favoritism. In the back of the room, I noticed Lisa Rodriguez, the attorney who'd helped me reclaim my future, raising her wine glass in a small toast. The legal victory had been just the beginning. The real work had been rebuilding trust, establishing healthy boundaries, and creating space for everyone to contribute their authentic abilities. Finally, I said, approaching the end of my speech. I want to announce our company's next major initiative. In partnership with the State Environmental Education Department, Sustainable Landscape Solutions will begin offering environmental consulting for urban schools, helping them create outdoor classrooms and demonstration gardens that teach children about ecological stewardship. Paula had designed the program framework during her final semester of coursework, combining environmental science education with hands-on gardening experiences that connected children to the natural world. The first pilot program would launch in January at 5 elementary schools in our region. With this program represents everything our company stands for: environmental protection, educational excellence, and community engagement. It also represents the kind of meaningful work that becomes possible when each person finds their authentic role in building something lasting and important. As I accepted the award and returned to my table, I realized that losing the business initially had been the catalyst that allowed me to build something far greater than what I'd lost. Not just a successful company, but authentic family relationships, professional fulfillment, and the confidence to never again accept less than I deserved. Paula leaned over as I sat down. "I'm proud of you, Karen, and I'm proud of what we've all built together." I reflected, was the most important word in that sentence. For the first time in our adult lives, Paula and I were genuinely partners in creating something meaningful, each contributing our individual strengths to shared goals. The evening concluded with networking conversations about future projects, inquiries about our educational programs, and invitations to speak at environmental conferences. As we left the ceremony, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from building something authentic and valuable, something that would continue growing, because it was based on competence, integrity, and genuine collaboration. 6 months earlier, I'd thought my family was destroying my future. Instead, they'd forced me to claim the future I deserved and to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than inherited obligation. Sometimes the greatest gift comes disguised as the worst betrayal, and sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're truly capable of building. The drive home took me past 3 properties. Our company had transformed a medical center healing garden, where patients found peace during treatment, a residential development where native plants provided habitat for migrating birds, and the community park where children learned to love nature through interactive water features and educational displays. Each project represented not just professional achievement, but proof that meaningful work creates lasting value that extends far beyond immediate financial gain. This was the legacy I wanted: to build landscapes that healed both people and ecosystems, educational programs that inspired environmental stewardship, and a business that proved sustainability and profitability could work together beautifully. As I pulled into my driveway, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, the betrayal that had forced me to value myself properly, the crisis that had taught my family to support each other authentically, the legal battle that had given me control over my own destiny, the reconciliation that had created space for everyone to contribute their genuine strengths. Most importantly, I thought about the future we were building together, a company that created beautiful, sustainable landscapes while teaching others to protect and restore the natural world, a family that supported individual growth while working towards shared, meaningful goals, and a legacy based on competence, integrity, and genuine care for both people and the environment. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged, doing work that mattered, with people who valued my contributions rather than taking them for granted. The satisfaction was deeper and more lasting than any award or professional recognition. It was the quiet confidence that comes from building something authentic and meaningful, something that would continue creating positive impact long after any individual recognition was forgotten. That night, I fell asleep planning tomorrow's work, reviewing designs for the Colorado Eco Resort, preparing grant applications for community environmental education, and developing the strategic plan that would guide our company's growth over the next 5 years. But more than that, I fell asleep knowing that I was finally living my own life, making my own choices, and building my own version of success based on my own values and abilities. It had taken a family betrayal to teach me that the greatest inheritance isn't something you receive, but something you create through your own efforts, guided by your own integrity, and shared with people who genuinely value what you have to offer. The American dream isn't about inheriting opportunity. It's about creating it through competence, persistence, and the courage to demand what you deserve while building something meaningful that extends far beyond personal benefit. And that dream, I realized, was finally and completely mine. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family betrayal, professional growth, and personal empowerment. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and your own future? How do you think families can best support each individual member's growth while working toward shared goals? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building professional success, and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of valuing yourself properly and demanding the respect you deserve. Nasai, remember, your greatest strength isn't what you inherit, but what you build through your own efforts, integrity, and commitment to creating something meaningful. Until next time, keep building the future you deserve.